Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Elanie Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Welcome with another week of getting us back on track of health. And we're having some guests these past few weeks, and I love it. I love meeting new people who are influencing their areas in the world for health. And I feel like we just have really smart, guests on here all the time.
Yeah, we have really scored so far.
We really do well. And already just talking to Maja here, I'm like, okay, she's smart. This is good. I'm going to learn a lot. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're pleased to welcome you to the show, Maja Miller. And Maja is a metabolic health coach. Mm-hmm. So that's really fun because we haven't had a metabolic health coach on this podcast yet. And Maja's going to talk to us today about adrenal fatigue. Adrenal dysfunction. Adrenal dysfunction. I think I'll let Maja kind of clarify maybe the difference between those, because I think adrenal fatigue is the term a lot of people are familiar with. And so I'd love...
More like buzzword.
It's a buzzword, right?
Yep.
Exactly. And we hear it a lot. It gets tossed around a lot. And Maja, I'd love for you just to kind of cover the distinction between those terms so that everybody is educated on the difference. But also, before we dive into all of that, I think Kay and we're always about the person behind the message, story. So we'd love if you could share with us a little bit of your story and why you became a metabolic health coach and just what sort of drove that process into the health realm and what your pathway
the functional route as opposed to more conventional medicine.
Absolutely. If you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to geek out with you guys on all things health and wellness, adrenals, gut, all the things. My name is Maja Miller, and I'm a metabolic health coach. My technical designation is an FDNP, which stands for Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioner. That's a mouthful. So I just say I'm a metabolic health coach. And I essentially help my clients when their doctors can't or won't. Wow. And I run clinical labs to really figure out the root cause of why my clients feel the way that they do. Typically, there's insomnia, anxiety, depression, weight gain, lack of libido, all of those fun things, IBS, eczema, skin issues. I mean, really, it runs the gamut. And they've gone to, my clients on average see 12 doctors before they get to me. Their doctors either refuse to run labs or they run labs and say everything's normal. But I know that none of those symptoms are normal.
Right.
So we run clinical labs. It might be anything from stool testing to blood chemistry to urine testing. And I run those labs to kind of figure out what's going on. And then I use those same labs to reverse all of their symptoms. So that's kind of who I am and what I do. So I think like a lot of practitioners that are kind of in the health and wellness space, I myself went to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. They tried to put me on an antidepressant, on Xanax, on IBS pills. Nobody could figure out why I was feeling the way that I was at like the ripe old age of 28. And wow. I just knew that there had to be another way. And I fell into functional nutrition when I was living in California, and it changed my life. It turned out that I was in the 99th percentile for mercury poisoning and mercury toxicity, which leading symptoms are anxiety and depression. Wow. And so yeah, I mean, that kind of started my 20-year journey into functional nutrition and functional medicine. And I moved to Austin to start a health and wellness lifestyle brand called Core 180, where I had a couple of Pilates and cycling studios. And that's where a lot of my clients were saying like, hey, I'm working out, but here's all these symptoms. And I would kind of put them into my program. And at the time I didn't do any clinical testing, and almost like everybody felt better because I took a functional approach to wellness. And during that time, I would say, hey, I'm not a doctor, but you should go get like a full thyroid panel run, like TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3, reverse T4, like all of the things. And oftentimes my clients would come back and say, my doctor flat out refused to like run the full panel. They only want to run TSH, or they would run the full panel and say, everything's in range, everything's normal. But here they are, hair is falling out, dry skin, lack of libido, heart palpitations, lethargic, right? All of these like classical hypothyroid symptoms. And so I got pissed and said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get trained so that I can run these clinical labs myself. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't use them to diagnose or treat diseases specifically, but 90 to 95% of all diseases are environmental. Only about 5 to 10% are genetic.
Right.
And let's be real, genetics load the gun, but it's your environment that pulls the trigger.
Right.
And so my clients don't care if I can like diagnose it and name it and blame it and then put them on a pill that like manages the symptoms. They want to get to the true root cause. They want to reverse the root cause.
Yes.
And actually feel better. So that's a little bit of, about my story. I had an incredibly high toxic load because of where I grew up. I was born in Poland. And when I went back for the first time, we ended up moving to the Midwest, Champaign, Illinois. So glyphosate was in our water. My backyard was a cornfield one year and soybean the next. Strangely enough, every single one of my friends in high school has an autoimmune disease. I had multiple friends, die of cancer. Wow. These are all environmental things. Young kids aren't supposed to be getting these kinds of diseases. Right. And when I was 12 years old, I ended up going back to Poland and I had a Chernobyl exposure.
Oh, wow.
So I irradiated my thyroid and my toxic burden was just very, very high.
Wow.
And then I moved to California and I was eating sushi 4 or 5 times a week. I mean, so, all of these things combined with, the fact that the US, literally our food is poison here. It's almost impossible to get good food.
Right.
Like our toxic load is higher, which is why so many people are sick. So, what I really care about in this world is that like people are safe, seen, and heard. And you can't be any of those things if you feel like garbage in your own body.
Right. Absolutely.
I love that you're like on the forefront of being like, to be alive, you should feel good. Like, I feel like so often, like as I get older, everyone's just like, well, you get older, you feel bad. And, oh, I feel bad. And that's just normal. And I love that you're like, no, like life should be that, like, you shouldn't have the dis-ease. Like, life should be ease, like to just feel alive.
We're looking for ease. We're looking for flow. And, whether you're a professional, whether you work in the home as a stay-at-home mom, maybe I'm a combo of both, your body is the channel for your mission in life. And you are out of integrity with that mission the moment that you lose focus of your physical wellness, physical and mental and emotional kind of just wellness.
Yeah.
So for me, inspired living means like, this is my body. This is my channel. This is the tool that I have in order to do the good work that I'm doing in the world. And whether, again, it's we're like raising like tiny humans or, growing, businesses, like this is the body that we get. So we have to make sure that we focus on feeling good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally align with your life mission and I love it so much. I'm here for it.
Yep. We're all here for it.
Yeah. So good. Okay. So then I'm just curious where you got your education then. Did you do it online or?
So I'm the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I'm a graduate of, and then FDNP is where I kind of learned about like the clinical labs and was able to start running those. It was awesome because I got to do it, from the comfort of my own home. Yep. And I was doing it, I was kind of like multitasking, still running my business and trying to, go through and get these credentials and kind of add another skill set to be able to provide another service to my clients that, seem to really need it.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
amazing.
That's incredible.
Okay.
I'm going to pick your brain more about that when we're done here too.
Right. Okay, so then that leads us now to what got your interest into the adrenal dysfunction. Did you see that maybe come up more often, or?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't really start getting into it until I suffered from it.
Okay.
It kind of, it's like I'm trying to heal myself
Yeah.
and I need to learn about that. And now I'm able to do that for my clients. So, I don't know how much you guys know or your listeners know about the adrenals. But they're
Not
part of your
much.
autonomic nervous system, and your autonomic nervous system has essentially two sides to it. One is the fight or flight. It's the sympathetic nervous system, and then there's the rest and digest side, and that's the parasympathetic nervous system. We want to spend the majority of our time in rest and digest, and this it's a very primal part of, like, it's a survival mechanism. You think about back in the day on the tundra, we see a saber-toothed tiger. We need to run away from the saber-toothed tiger so that we can continue living. And there's a few things that kind of like kick on. And so your adrenals are about the size of a cube of sugar. They sit above your kidneys, so you have two of them, and they are tiny, but they are mighty. They are responsible for so many things in your body. And when you experience a stressor, your adrenals kick in, and they produce the stress hormone called cortisol. And so, what ends up happening is, there's short-term survival is trying to be enhanced, right?
Right.
So heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, your breathing rate goes up. You've got a lot of blood flow to your big muscle movers, your quads, your glutes. You have more energy, you have more strength. You're trying to get away from that saber-toothed tiger. But it comes at a cost, right? And so there are things that are suppressed. And so the things that are suppressed are digestion. You've seen movies where somebody gets scared and they like wet their pants, right?
Right.
So the bowels and the bladder empty because you got to like run away. Your immune system response goes down because you don't need to digest food. It doesn't matter if your body can find those cancer cells and kill them if you don't get away from the saber-toothed tiger, right? Reproduction, long-term survival, reproduction goes down. It doesn't matter if you can reproduce if you don't get away from that saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
Growth hormone production.
Yep.
Right? Growth hormone production, tissue repair. It doesn't matter if you can repair tissues if you can't get away from the saber-toothed tiger. So essentially, when you are in fight or flight, their short-term survival is enhanced, and then the long-term survival is essentially depressed. Okay. And back in the day, we would occasionally see a saber-toothed tiger. But today, we live these modern lives where we have really three kinds of like buckets of stress, and we are predominantly in fight or flight. And cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It means it breaks you down at a cellular level. So when we are kind of move from, periodic stress to chronic stress, and our sympathetic nervous system is constantly turning on, cortisol is dumping, short-term survival is enhanced, but long-term survival is suppressed. That's where we start getting into a lot of these issues, right? Where you can enter into one of three stages of dysfunction. And really, when you break down the three different kinds of categories of stress, we realize like, oh, our adrenals are like really on all the time.
Yeah. Especially because we have like physical, chemical, emotional stress. Those things happen all the time. Like we're essentially dealing with one of those at any point. And I remember learning that in in a city, the background noises of traffic, of car horns honking, and even the sound of a cell phone ding are noises that are louder than what our ancestors would have heard on a regular basis. And back in the time of our ancestors, you know, the sounds they would have been hearing would have been alerting them to danger. Like they could have been hearing an avalanche, or they could have been hearing like the saber-toothed tiger roaring, or whatever it was, or a stampede. And now we hear those sounds all the time. And I think what people don't realize is how much it innately, whether you're aware of it or not, innately triggers that stress response. And so many of my clients, I don't know if you've run into this, Maja, I'm sure, when I ask them to rate their stress, because it's one of the most important questions I ask, they downplay it. They tend to downplay it quite a bit because essentially we don't realize how stressed out we really are all the time. And I think that if somebody doesn't have, you know, a loved one actively dying, or if they don't actively have this terrible disease, or, you know, whatever it is, they think they're not stressed. Just being at work all day and being stressed out from that, they're like, no, I'm not stressed out. I mean, yeah, my boss is an a-hole, and I really hate my job. I can't, I have kids. We're up to our eyeballs in debt. I do take care of my aging parent. Like, they list all these things that are significant sources of stress, and then tell me they're not stressed out.
Do you work mostly with women?
I do. I would say it's about 80% of my population is women.
Well, so we are also just used to pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and taking care of other people.
Taking care of everyone else in the room.
We're constantly subordinating our needs for the needs of our children, our partners, our friends, our employees, our bosses. And I'm actually super impressed that you kind of brought up those three, you know, the physical, the chemical, and the emotional stressors. Because when, you know, I have a workshop called the Adrenal Detox, where I talk about, I'm trying to expose people to the reality that, like, oh, guess what? You actually are stressed. And so, you know, if you look at, you know, I'm a former D1, you know, athlete. So that's a physical stressor. You know, any sort of trauma, micro trauma, fractures, muscle injuries, nerve compressions, repetitive injuries, intense and prolonged exercise, physical stressors, poor posture, accidents, right? So for your listeners, like maybe you're like going like, yep, I have this. And then if you take a look at chemical stressors, I don't know, inflammatory foods, almost all foods are inflammatory these days. Additives, pesticides, and GMOs, it's in our water, y'all. Like, we're drinking it and eating it all day long. Alcohol, caffeine, sugar, poor sleep, lack of exercise, antibiotics, over-the-counter meds. Those are all biologicals. Those are all biochemical stressors. And then there's like the emotional stressors, right? Which is like, partner was a jerk, stressful day at work. Now, when you have this expanded definition of what a stress is, and you understand that whether your mother is dying or whether or not, like, you're eating inflammatory foods, that stress response, that stress hormone, it's the same. Like, your body doesn't know how to differentiate, right?
Right.
So now we have like this expanded view of stress, and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like, I have experienced or am experiencing every single one of those things. And Caroline Myss wrote this amazing book called Anatomy of the Spirit. And she's the kind of the first person that I heard say that your biography becomes your biology. And so it's like all these things that have like happened to you in your past are actually living in your body at a cellular level. So stress is, it's the single. I do two things as a metabolic health coach. I coach down stressors and I coach up vital reserve. That's all I do, because stress is kind of the beginning of that like metabolic, that stress cascade. And at the end of it is disease, right? Disease.
Yes. I love this so much. Okay. I want to know all of your things that you help people do with their bringing their stress down. I think a couple years ago, I think I was unconsciously stressed because I'm like, oh, I keep my life pretty chill. I'm fine. But I found myself like seeking out, like, I need to go to this. I don't know. I just was feeling kind of worked up, I guess. And I had a mentor be like, Kay, and you just need to practice being. And now you're trying to do a lot of doing, and you're trying to be all these things. But as a woman, she was like, Kay, you do need to take care of yourself first, and you just need to be. And I was like, well, I don't know how to be because I got things to do down the list. And she was like, you actually need to. And that's why I think meditation is so helpful now and really popular now, because we don't know how to just connect our soul with our mind, with our body here in this moment. And so she's always just having me like, I'm sure you've heard of like that bilateral tapping to just bring yourself.
Tapping, EMDR.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love all that stuff. And so I now do that kind of on the reg because I was just so unconscious to my stress. I didn't even realize it. And now I'll be like, oh my gosh, right now I'm stressed. And I'm like, but in this moment, I am safe. I am okay. People are taken care of. And I really have to consciously talk myself through reality. It's just the weirdest thing, but it's helpful. Yeah.
I really love somatic modalities.
Yeah.
We are in our heads and our brains all the time, and we are completely disconnected from our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is like pretty intelligent people that really need to kind of get over any sort of like trauma with a capital T or even trauma with a lowercase t. Can really kind of talk around that stuff. And I would kind of like run circles around a lot of my therapists.
Yes.
And then the other thing is, even if you're not running circles around your therapist, right, but you're constantly talking about all the things that have happened, you're actually you're re-traumatizing yourself. Like if you haven't cleared that out of your body, then you kind of think it's happening again and again and again and again.
Yep.
So some of my most powerful like ways to de-stress, I think first and foremost, understanding like what toxicities, what things are kind of happening in your body that you're unaware of, food sensitivities, bacterial overgrowth, like those kinds of things, exposures to environmental toxins, because those biochemical stressors are very real.
Right.
So like, that's like one of the first things, I mean, that's like literally like the foundation of the work that I do with my clients, but then any sort of somatic work, putting your feet in the earth and grounding, sleeping on a grounding mat, having a grounding mat underneath your desk, getting up and being exposed to sunrise and sunset light. These are physical things that we can do. They lower stress. Tapping, breathing, anything that oxygenates the body. But really, I believe that therapy obviously has a place, for certain times with certain people, but I've actually now found that a lot of therapy is more damaging than the somatic work, which actually allows this trauma to leave the actual body. So I know that's a hot take, and I'm sure there's going to be some people that are like, what? She doesn't believe in therapy. Like, that's not true. Like, there's a time and a place for it. And if your listeners are having an amazing time in therapy, then like, go for it. Keep going, right? Keep doing what's working. But I really, really like the somatic work because we spend 99.999% of our time in our heads.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that takes care of helps take care of one of the cups of the stressors, which is such a big one in the modern world and for women. So
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So when a client comes to you, so you have the toolkit of like all the blood work, the stool work, and all of that. So and then I'm guessing you kind of take inventory of their life. So are you able to give them like those somatic tools? And then you also are able to give them maybe whether a diet plan to follow or what to eat or what to not, or then also some herbs that would help them detox, or what does it look like for a client for you?
Yeah, well, so when I work with clients initially, it's a 60-day sprint. So we work together for about 8 weeks. There's 4 phases. And the first phase is, I call it seen and heard, because so many of my clients have been to so many doctors who have told them that they're fine, it's just in their head, or it just, you're a mom, all moms feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the medical history. And so I ask about 400 questions about environment, physical symptoms, and stressors.
Wow.
So that I know exactly what's going on with their body and their life that may be contributing to how they feel. It allows me to really connect the dots of different stresses in their life over time and identify really like a pattern of symptoms, which allow us to understand which systems of the body really need help. So, we're talking about adrenals right now. I have an adrenal stress causes kind of like inventory so that I can kind of see, like what categories, is it emotional stressors? Is it physical stressors? And so at this point, like I start getting kind of clues to like what the healing opportunities are. And then we move into phase 2, which is now that I know a little bit about your biography and your I want to know a little bit more about your biology. And that's where we run clinical labs. And it changes for every single client based on their medical history. So if they have a family history of autoimmune disease, I may do an autoimmune panel to see what types of antibodies are kind of floating around the body that are typically linked with certain types of autoimmune diseases. But this is, running tests, saliva, urine, blood, stool, hair samples. And it'll explain the symptoms that were mapped out in that first phase. And it provides all the information necessary for me to create, a tailored plan to reverse those symptoms. It usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get those labs back. And so during those times, it's phase 3, and I call it quick wins. And that's where we're doing simple things like stabilizing blood sugar, working on sleep hygiene, working on, light exposure. I would call them kind of like my foundational non-negotiables, where it's like, if you don't fix sleep, nothing else matters because it's so absolutely critical and important. And then usually by the, like week 7 or so, I've got all of the labs back, and I do a results and recommendations session where I do a personalized protocol. And it's everything that my clients need in order to kind of reverse all of those symptoms. And I really have a couple of tools in my toolkit. You mentioned that, you're doing too much. So that's all the foundation of like all identity work. So the foundation of my practice is, who do you need to be in order to do the things that you need to do so that you can have the things that you want to have? And then the dials that I turn are food, rest, energy, stress reduction, and then smart supplementation, which can essentially speed up your healing by about 50%. So that's kind of like the process, the container. I only work one-on-one with people. And those are kind of the dials and the tools that I have at my fingertips. And really, that's all you need for the majority. I mean, for everybody, like that's what you need, period. That's it.
Right. We'll
love it.
Take us back a little bit. Before we started recording this podcast, we talked about how the term adrenal fatigue is dismissed. Essentially, people will say that's not real, that's not proven, versus something like adrenal dysfunction. And talk to us a little bit about what is it about adrenal fatigue that is so dismissed in the medical community versus adrenal dysfunction? And what do people do if they are listening to this podcast and they're thinking, yeah, that describes me. I think I have that. What can they do about it? How can they understand what's going on in their body?
So I think for a long time, I just think that the allopathic Western medical model is, if it's not clinical, it doesn't exist.
Right.
But like, you don't wake up with Addison's disease,
right,
which is an autoimmune disease where your adrenals produce 0 cortisol, right? Okay. Or very little, like not enough, like completely. So on the one end of the spectrum, you've got Addison's disease. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got fully operational, healthy adrenals.
Right.
Are you telling me, Dr. So-and-so, that we overnight flip a switch and go from one end of the spectrum to the other?
Right.
No, there's a progression of disease, right?
Absolutely.
Like there's something becomes clinical, but with autoimmune disease, for example, you can start showing antibodies 20 years before you get a clinical diagnosis, right? So, so, I think that a lot of times people were saying that, adrenal fatigue isn't real. Also, a lot of women were experiencing this. And so I think a lot of times the things that women feel aren't taken seriously. I mean, just look at maternity, right? Like obstetrics in the United States. Don't even get me started.
Yeah, I know.
Right. If you're a woman, or God forbid, if you're a woman of color,
right.
it's even worse, right?
Absolutely.
If you're, one of my black or brown or, mamas out there. And so I think that oftentimes things that doctors don't understand, they say it's not real.
Right.
And the reality is that doctors are just reading books that are written. They're just humans reading books that are written by other humans. Right. And so for the longest time, if you were to talk to like a GI, like a GI doctor, they would tell you that leaky gut isn't real.
Right.
It's now now they understand it's absolutely real. And what it is low grade sepsis. Right. And so I think that there's kind of this misconception that like the adrenals get tired because they're overworking. That's not actually what's happening. Your body is really amazing and so smart, right? It's like the ultimate, intelligence. And what ends up happening is that your body understands that cortisol is catabolic, that it breaks you down at a cellular level. So what your body starts doing is it starts producing less and less cortisol to protect itself from itself.
Right.
The other thing the body can do is if you're under like a lot of stress, is it will start pulling calcium out of the teeth and the bones, and it will start calcifying your tissue, your cells, so that the cortisol can't get in. So, but if the cortisol can't get in, neither can the thyroid stimulating hormone, neither can the magnesium, which you need for progesterone creation, neither can the zinc, which you need to create testosterone. I mean, so, it's kind of like the body has a way of like protecting itself, but it's very kind of like simplistic. And so I don't know. I mean, I think maybe that's why, I think that's why I think a lot of practitioners will say, oh, it's adrenal dysfunction or it's HPA axis dysfunction. So sometimes it's the hypothalamus that's signaling to the pituitary. Sometimes the pituitary isn't signaling to the adrenals, not necessarily with just the adrenal. So, the nerds call it HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal dysfunction. But so I like to use the term adrenal dysfunction simply because a lot of times people will try to discredit you as if you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Right. And it's like, I can run circles around those people twice on Sunday.
I believe you could.
So that's another reason why I don't like to use, I don't love to use the term adrenal fatigue, even though that's kind of what like everybody else is familiar with it now.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love you have such a pragmatic, smart, your view of healing a body. I'm here for it. I love it. And you're very smart. So thank you for being
I'm here for the compliments.
No, yes. So good.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for a listener today who is thinking, okay, this really, the symptomology, the things you've described really sound like me. What's something practical they could start doing today? What are some of the quick wins that you would share with your clients that they could begin? Because obviously my recommendation, I mean, I'm a nutritionist, so I always recommend that people seek professional help, right? That they look for a nutritionist, that they look for somebody who's a functional medicine doctor, somebody who's a metabolic health coach to help them. But what are some things that they could start doing on their own today to get that ball rolling until they can get some professional medical help?
Yeah. So in that workshop, I outline 4 things that you can do that take less than 4 hours over the course of 30 days. So here's the spoiler alert. I'm giving it all so the first thing for me is light exposure. Within, I would say 45 minutes of sunrise. So that sets and resets your circadian rhythm. If you're having a hard time sleeping, which is a stressor, insomnia is a stressor, and we're trying to reduce stress, sleeping at night actually starts at waking up in the morning. And so getting actual sunlight into your eyes, so that's like the very first thing.
How long?
10-15 minutes.
Okay. Yep.
You can sit outside. If you can ground your feet, you can put your feet in the earth. You can sit outside, no sunglasses. You're essentially spending a lot of money for hormone issues if you wear sunglasses. So I tell my clients, stop wearing sunglasses. So sunlight is incredibly important. You need to structure your day to follow the sun and moon. So sun exposure, movement. If you can tag team and kind of do both at the same time. So go for a walk within 30 to 45 minutes of sunrise and sunset optimally. If I could have the things that if I had my druthers, I'd have sunrise and sunset, because then sunset is signaling melatonin production. So that's first and foremost. If you are feeling any sort of symptoms and you are intermittent fasting, you are effing your body up.
Yeah.
So you have to have, I would say, between 20 to 30 grams of protein within 30 to 45 minutes of waking up. So
yes,
my
I'm going to pause you because
ultimate routine is you wake up,
Yep.
you throw on your sneakers, throw on a hat, out you go, probably some clothes too. Otherwise that might be a little weird for your neighbors. But get that sun exposure, and then you already have a high protein breakfast prepped for the week. And then you can eat your breakfast after that. So we've got those are 3 things, right? And then I would say the next thing would be sleep hygiene, obviously. So making sure that, there's a number of things that you can do to kind of improve sleep hygiene. Avoiding blue light would probably be the single most important thing that you can do. And if you're going to do your TikTok scrolling at night, make sure that you're at least making the light more amber, which is ancestrally, right? You're the color of a fire. So I would say those are those are the 4 things. You can prep your breakfast in 15 minutes for the entire week if you know how to do it the right way. You can do 10-15 minutes of sun exposure a day. A walk. This is even before you don't do those HIIT workouts. If you're just start walking first thing in the morning. I think those are if you can't do those things, none of the other stuff that I can do will actually help.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the life's balance. And what I was going to say is that we had another person on here who talked about intermittent fasting and protein in the morning and sunshine in the morning. And Elanie was practicing intermittent fasting. And then because of that episode, you started having breakfast, and it greatly improved your health, which is amazing because you're even a nutritionist. But then hearing this, it's so spot on and it's so helpful.
Well, and I think it's so individualized, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every person is different. And I think one of the issues and the guest, Dina Thompson, who was on, what she likes to use the terminology is time-restricted eating. And I think the problem with intermittent fasting is it's become so mainstream that people can adopt it without knowing anything about their bodies, without knowing anything about their adrenal health, which is a huge factor. And they just read about it somewhere, or they see a video on this
podcast.
TikTok or a podcast, and they just dive into it. And that was sort of what, I had read several books and saw all the benefits of intermittent fasting. And essentially what I was doing was just skipping breakfast because that's what I naturally would do anyway. I was always in a hurry to get to work because I, at that time, worked a full-time job out of my house. And so I would skip breakfast because that's what was easy. It was easy to skip breakfast, and then I wouldn't eat until noon. But I didn't do any research into, is this actually beneficial for me and my hormones? And there were a couple of times when I would actually just stop eating earlier in the night instead of, having a really late dinner, which is also very bad for your sleep.
Yes.
So normally I would have like really late dinner because I wouldn't be hungry till later in the day, and I'd be finishing dinner at 8 p.m. and then going to bed because I had to get up for workout so that I could get to work by 7:15. I was getting up for workout at 4:30 a.m. And so I was going to bed at like 9, and I was literally eating at like 8 p.m., going to bed at 9, which was terrible, not enough time to digest my food before trying to sleep, and then not eating again until noon the next day. So I was totally wrecking my health. And I think for
it's
so
wrecking
many,
your hormones. And look, there are a lot of benefits to autophagy, right? Like I understand the benefits.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I just read a report that only about 10% of the US population is metabolically healthy. And if you are metabolically unhealthy, intermittent fasting isn't like, especially for a woman, we're dealing with, really, you have to fast like a girl. I know there's a book called Fast Like a Girl, but we have you if you're doing that during certain times, of your cycle, like it's absolutely devastating. And so and like, let's talk about that. Like, it's also kind of disordered eating, like restricting your food to 1 hour a day. Or so if I work with a highly female population, and that is, many of my clients have had, a dabble or so with disordered eating, or like full blown, eating disorders. And so, like, you really, so it all depends. It all depends on like what's going on in your particular body at this particular time. So yeah, those are the things that I think are so important. I think you just outlined like probably everybody's day that's like listening. You're like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And the other thing that I like really cannot stand is when people talk about intuitive eating. And because if you are healthy and metabolically sound, you have normal hunger cues. But what you were saying is you're not even hungry. Well, you weren't hungry because you were in a stage of HPA axis dysfunction. And so if I was, as your nutritionist, to say, just listen to your body, well, your body it doesn't know what it needs, actually. You have gotten so out of the normal cycles of following the moon, following the sun, that, like, I get it. Yes, our ancestors would go on a hunt and have and gorge themselves. And then it might be lighter food for a couple of days and they would hunt again. But that's not how we live our lives today. And so stepping into that ancestral way of finding food and consuming food isn't necessarily a good starting point for somebody, right? Get all systems online, and then let's talk about the benefits of time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting or whatever the heck people want to call it, today. Because your body doesn't actually know, it doesn't have those hunger cues first thing in the morning. Most of my clients aren't hungry until 2 or 3.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that was, after we sat, that was probably about a year ago, I think, that we had that first episode with Dina, and she talked about the importance of having a breakfast within, a certain time period of waking up with about 30 grams of protein. And I started doing that. And once I started doing that and being a lot more mindful of my sleep hygiene and getting better sleep, I would wake up and have normal hunger cues again, which was something Dina said, because I was like, but I'm not hungry until noon. She's like, yeah, because your body is all messed up. Like, just give it some time, give it some time.
My clients, they're like, I'm force feeding them essentially. They're like, I'm like, I know, like, you're going to get over it. But like, when you wake up, you should be hungry.
Yes.
Like, that is like, you've been fasting. Like your fast is if you think about midnight, midnight, middle of the night,
Right.
that means that you should be going to bed around 6 o'clock.
Right.
12 o'clock is the middle of your night.
Right.
Right. And so like everything is just off.
Shifted,
like the way that we live is off. And if you are digesting, you're not detoxing.
Yes.
And if you're not detoxing, your stress levels are significantly higher. Right. And if you're not detoxing, you are more likely to, you're a good host for bacteria, for parasites, for viruses, for all the things.
Absolutely.
So
so how late do you think you should have dinner then to be able to clear your stomach so you can heal during the night?
I say, like, don't eat at least 3 hours. Give it at least 3 hours before bed.
That feels right.
Before bed.
3 to 5 is kind of what I say. 3 to 5. But,
and then you'll be hungry for breakfast.
Yeah, and then you'll fast all night.
Yep.
And then there you go. You're intermittent fasting. Like
Yes. As
you're fasting. You have a time period where you're not eating. You know?
Yes. And nature designed it.
And it's so much easier to have that time period while you sleep, which was what we discussed too in that episode. All about time restricted eating was giving about 3 hours or more. I like the idea of even more. I know I sleep better. I have tracked my sleep. I wear an Oura ring. I have tracked my sleep since September of 2020. And I know that if I eat too close to bedtime, I don't get good deep sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night. And like, even now having a child, my daughter is 3 months old, she sleeps better than I do at night. If I eat late, I wake up even when she's not awake. So she can sleep through the whole night and I'll still wake up. So I've just really, even being a new parent, I'm realizing how important it is to take care of my own health so that I can be at my best for her. And I'm not, it's so easy to be like, I'll take care of my kid and then I'll eat at 8 p.m. when they're in bed. But that's so terrible. I mean, you can't live your life that way. You're going to have to make it work with kids for the rest of your life. So,
and you're talking about, so, one of the things that I always like to educate my clients on is these like, almost like the stages of adrenal dysfunction. You're in, like, let's say you're in, mom phase, right? Like the last 6 months, I'm a new mom too. The last 6 months have been wild. And I was sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night pre-baby. And then all of a sudden this human comes and, even if he gets a 5, 6, 7 hour stretch, that's not what I need. And it's not what I was getting, in the past. And so, I always, that first stage of adrenal dysfunction, I call it, it's like the stressed stage.
Yeah.
And this is where you have acute stress. And you are stressed and your body kind of like adapts and resists that stress. Cortisol is released, cortisol goes away, cortisol release, cortisol goes away, clears the body. And during that time of that first phase, that first stress phase, that's when like all of the damage actually happens.
Yeah. Wow.
Because that's where the cortisol is like breaking you down at a cellular level. The messed up part about that is usually it's when we feel really good, because cortisol actually makes us feel good.
Right.
Right. And so we think I can handle more. Like you're firing it. We go from both hips, firing all cylinders. I can do more. And you feel good, right? You have this like high.
Because your body is like, let me help you escape the tiger.
Yes. This is where all of the damage happens. And, in that phase, a lot of my clients will feel edgy. It's hard to fall asleep. Your mental function might be a little like fast and scattered. You may feel like other people are too slow, like they aren't driving fast enough. They're not getting your food fast enough. They're not getting your check fast enough. Right. And then eventually, if that stress doesn't go away, right, we move into a phase called tired and wired. And that's where we're feeling overwhelmed. Other people feel like they're incompetent. They're just like not doing it right. It's hard to actually stay asleep. So maybe you're falling asleep, but you wake up between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And then your thought pattern is like really kind of erratic. And then if you still don't eliminate those stressors, right, now your body is kind of moving into this place where you're completely crashed and you're exhausted. You feel like other people are demanding of you, of your time. You may be sleeping 10 hours, but it's really unrefreshing and you're just like unable to generate ideas. And I think understanding where you're at in that spectrum tells you how much runway you have.
Yep.
Like, where am I at? Like, am I already like tired or wired? I get that like second wind at night where your cortisol patterns are kind of, inversed. It's really important to understand kind of where you're at, because you're going to, for example, modify what kind of exercises you do based on that adrenal stress level. So if you are, in one or the other, I may recommend more cardio for you, or I may recommend more strength training for you, or I may recommend neither and only restorative things for you. So it's really important to understand your kind of stage of HPA axis dysfunction so that you know specifically what do I need right now, instead of like following some, generalized advice.
Absolutely.
Wow. This is making me think my husband, okay, I guess this is also talking to like the modern way of like workout, wake up early, run 12 miles, get it, like that go, go, go culture. And my husband, he actually was like, I'm going to work out every single day for a year and like hard, like at least half hour with his heart rate above whatever aerobic, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so he nailed that, crushed it. He did it another year. And he's worked out his whole life. So I'm like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. But I've always just been like, you know what? I got to take it easy. Like, this is a lot. Well, he did like 800 days straight. My husband's hilarious, of working out with this high cortisol. And then he wasn't feeling good. And then he actually has Hashimoto's now. And it was like, this whole time, I'm like, man, you're like a go-getter. And I'm just like, man, I can't do that. And what I'm kind of thinking is like my body is more self-regulating of like, you're going to burn yourself out, where he kind of is that get it culture and just pushed it. And I was like, well, see, this is what happens, friends. Like,
and essentially burned out his adrenals and then burned out his thyroid.
Yeah. And now he's like, now we're doing all the restorative, and now he can't really work out because his body he's in recovery, And so there really is something to that. Because now we're 38, 39, going on 40. It's like when you're in your 30s or late 20s, you can fake all of this, right? Like you can be the go-getter mom and you can work out hard and you can handle the stress. But after a decade, you just need to learn a better way of living so you don't burn out, friends. Like it's just interesting how culture and expectations kind of dictate how we act. But then I also kind of feel like everything catches up with you. So self-regulate your bodies and your cortisols, friends, because it will catch up to you.
Over-exercising is a physical stressor.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What are some of the worst things that people do that can lead to adrenal dysfunction that people are probably doing today that even they may think is healthy? But what are some of the worst things?
Oh, man. I mean, this is hot take, but a vegan or a vegetarian diet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep.
Preach.
I think maybe 5 to 10% of the entire world's population has a metabolic type that is geared towards being able to eat a vegetarian or a vegan diet.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I like to look at like primal ancestral, right? Like,
yeah.
You were eating meat. You weren't just eating seeds and grasslands,
right?
So
absolutely.
I would say like a vegetarian or a vegan diet. I won't work with vegetarians or vegans unless they're open to eating animal-based proteins.
Yeah.
So that's probably like the very first one.
Absolutely.
And I would say lack of sleep. Staying up past 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I would say is probably the second biggest thing.
Yeah.
So food and sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're key.
And like we talked about, I think the working out way too hard. I see people do that thinking it's going to benefit their health and then not taking time to rest and not dealing, like you said, with the stressors in their life. I know for me personally, it took my husband and I 3 years to get pregnant when we were trying that whole time. And ultimately the thing I had to do was leave the job I was at.
The stressful job.
Which is, I know that doesn't feel like an option for everybody, and it may not be, but if you're in a place where you have a significant stressor in your life, if you don't deal with that stressor in one way or another, you just simply aren't going to get better.
There are consequences to stress.
I mean, you say like, I don't think that's an option. So like, well, let's like work through that. Right. Because I think a lot of people probably feel that, well, that's just not an option. I can't leave my job.
Yes, please. Let's work through that.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So keep doing what you're doing and then talk to me in 5 years when you get fired from your job because you cannot perform. You have such poor mitochondrial function. You have such poor immune health. You are so micronutrient deficient. You have such a heavy toxic burden that you are unable to go to work. So pick your freaking hard.
Right. Exactly.
Pick your hard,
or it's going to be hard then.
Yeah.
And so at least now you have like the resources to be able to do it. At least you have the mental clarity to be able to put together a plan. And I'm not saying like tomorrow go to your boss and, break up, but like put together a plan. If you know your boss is toxic AF, if you know your partner is toxic AF, if you know your mom is toxic, you got to put together a plan. You got to get these people out of your lives, period. Right. Full stop. We're done talking about it. Like there's otherwise everything else that happens. It's like, it's 100 times worse.
Yeah. Those are great boundaries. That is so good.
I think that's so crucial. It's so key. I did everything for my diet. I did everything for supplements. I ran all the tests, all the panels, all the hormone checks. I did everything to balance everything and have it perfect. And nothing changed until I quit my job.
So quit your job, friends.
And I'm not,
kidding. Get a new one. Okay.
But I made that plan too, right? My husband and I were talking for almost a year before I was able to make that change. And so I think I've gotten eye rolls when I've told people that, because they think exactly what you just walked us through, like, oh, I can't do it. And I was like, well, I didn't have an option, because to me, it wasn't optional to have a child if I could do anything about it. So at some point, we, over the course of a year, and it required a lot of major life changes and is still requiring a lot of major life changes, but it's all worth it because I have my health back and I have a child. To me, it was well worth it.
This is kind of a full circle moment, because when we talked about, I was kind of giving my quick little overview of what is suppressed when you are in fight or flight: reproduction. So it's literally your body is saying, oh, I have to handle the saber-toothed tiger, not going to handle that baby, not going to handle that cancer, not going to handle that tissue repair, not going to handle digesting that food. Like it's, your body is literally making a trade-off all the time. And it's constantly seeking balance, right? So if the body is constantly dealing with saber-toothed tiger after saber-toothed tiger, it has to deprioritize the other things that it deals with. So it's like, how bad do you want to like heal your body? How bad do you want the baby? How bad? Like, we are so disconnected from the way that we should be living. And it's amazing that you've been able to make all these changes. I find the people that do the work that we do are the people that needed the work to begin with. We teach what we need to learn. I mean, really, I'm like my own client. I'm my first client.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So true. Well, gosh, we love the work that you're doing. And I can already tell, like, the magic that you are bringing your clients, because you're so smart and just so pragmatic about it. It's so good. But so do you take clients only in Austin? Do you take people that are not from Austin? How do they get a blood panel or all their panels if they're not from your area? Like, walk us through that.
I work with clients all over the world. I just signed up a client in Okinawa, Japan.
Wow.
The majority of my clients are in the US, and I ship the labs to their homes.
Okay.
If I need blood chemistry, typically they can go to their doctor and I give them a list of everything that I want, and their doctor can run those labs for them. If they don't have a doctor or they don't have insurance, I can run the blood chemistry labs for them. So yeah, I work with clients kind of all over. And once I determine what labs I want to run on you, I send them to your house, except for blood chemistry. So like, some of the thyroid or some of the blood chemistry, some of the autoimmune panels, my food sensitivity lab requires a blood draw. So that you'll go to a lab and get that done. So it's pretty easy. And honestly, most people prefer like sitting at home on a Zoom call versus like going into somebody's office and sitting in traffic. I mean, so especially with COVID, right? The post-COVID world, everyone's like loving living at home and kind of living their lives that way. So yeah, it's really easy to get those labs done.
That's amazing.
And how do people find you? So for the people who are listening to this episode who really want to seek greater health, I think if you're having any of these signs of adrenal dysfunction, then Maja seems like a good fit for you. How do they reach out to you and contact you?
Yeah, they reach out to me by going to my website, majamiller.com, and it's Maja with a J. And I'll ask you a couple of questions, and then you'll set up a time. We'll hop on a Zoom, and I'll let you know if I'm a good fit for you and if I think you're a good fit for me. I'm not for everybody. I would say the types of people that I do very well with are kind of that like type A go-getter, we take action, tell me what to do person.
Yes.
Where motivation isn't like really the issue.
Yeah.
And it's folks that have like more money than they have time and they need something that's like tailored and specific to them. They're the folks that have been listening to this whisper of like, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong. Nobody's listening. So those are kind of like the three things where it's like, okay, then we're probably a good fit for each other. You'll just set up a time with me and then we'll figure out if it works. And if it does, then we'll jump into, it's called the Inside Out Protocol Next Level. So Next Level is kind of my one-on-one deep dive labs, high touch, you have me at your disposal for 8 weeks kind of plan.
Awesome.
So cool. I respect the work you do, and this has been such a pleasure to talk to you and get to know it. And we definitely want to have you on in the future for some other topics too. I want to pick your brain some more. I have so many questions.
Let's get into it. Let's do it. I'm here for all of it. So thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for the episode to come out and to share it with my people. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Is there anything on the topic of adrenal dysfunction that we haven't covered that you wanted to cover with us today? I know we kind of did a whole roundabout discussion of it, but is there anything we missed?
No, I mean, I think we did a lot actually. Maybe it wasn't like super like structured, but really if you think about it, you now know about your autonomic nervous system, fight or flight, rest and digest. You know about your adrenals, you know about the stress hormone, you know kind of what gets suppressed, what gets prioritized, you know about the stages of adrenal dysfunction, and you've got like a handful of things that you can like literally like take your earbuds out and like incorporate them into your life to kind of jumpstart your healing. I think that's pretty comprehensive. I would say the only thing, this could be like a topic for another day, but eventually if you are having adrenal issues, you're going to start having gut issues because cortisol dumps into the intestines, and then that kind of signals the brain, and you can actually, if you get to a certain stage of stress, you can actually, without experiencing a stress, there's this automatic stress response that's happening. It's a loop. And it's very difficult to break.
Yeah.
And that's where you start seeing like true metabolic chaos, where many other aspects of the body are kind of starting to break down. So, it's better to get ahead of this, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like,
absolutely.
choose your hard. It may be hard right now to get out of bed and cut toxic people out of your lives and change what you do for a living. But what's more difficult is the autoimmune diseases that tend to come in threes. The brain fog, the anxiety, the depression, like these are the serious symptoms that like so many of my clients are experiencing. Mm-hmm. And that's way harder because now you're trying to recover. I have one client in mind. Man, she's like an executive at like a tech company. And she had such massive brain fog that she couldn't follow basic instructions, like go to this website and buy this supplement. Wow. It would take like a week or two. I mean, it was, I just had to be so patient with her. And so that's kind of what's in your future if you don't do the work now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's so important. And I'd love to have you on again and talk about the adrenal dysfunction in combination with gut health. I know that could be, like you said, its own episode, and I'd really love to cover that. And then also love to cover more on the topic of fertility. Certainly while my husband and I were trying to conceive, I was in a lot of circles with other women dealing with infertility issues, and I love to have resources for the people in that group. That's really where my heart is, because it was such a hard road.
Yeah, I would love that. It's interesting now that I'm a mom. So 2 years ago, when we were like starting to think about like kids, my husband goes, you're going to start working with like moms and really like IVF moms. And I was like, no way. And sure enough, like I would say probably like the last like 4 podcasts that I've been booked on have been like IVF and fertility podcasts. And so so near and dear to my heart. I have like an insane use case we can kind of talk about when we do that. But IVF doctors are not incented to get you pregnant, full stop.
Yeah. 100%.
Period. 100%. So yeah, let's do it. I'm here for all of it. So thanks, you guys.
I'd love that. Great. Yeah. Well, we've loved having you on. And I think this episode has offered so much value for our listeners. So we really appreciate your time. And I'm so excited to release it in just a couple of weeks here. And so thank you, Maja.
Thank you very much, Maja. And for our listeners, go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. You should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!